That over again. Again, tell us the years you were there, and again,
All right.
your first memory
Okay.
really being a camp. And try to look into
I was at Camp Barney Meadows from 1964 through 1975, with a couple of years off in the early 70s. Memory of camp was as a Village One camper, walking from near the front gate of camp into camp, and it was the road wasn't paved; it was all dirt and gravel. I remember after several heavy rains, losing a shoe and having to walk back to Village One with one shoe.
Do you remember Shabbat at camp?
I remember that Shabbat services, particularly Friday night services, were fun. I remember, having the opportunity to sit with family members and friends at a different table, and then the whole camp literally walking to Shabbat services right after dinner, and just everybody sitting inside the chapel. I remember services were fairly short, which as a young person I enjoyed that, and I remember singing lots of songs, and I think that really gave me the love to sing in services, because I know a lot of synagogues have cantors that do a lot of the heavy lifting with their singing, but I've always enjoyed a participatory service.
Your experience and your kids' experience.
I think the things that were the same were communal living in a cabin in a bunk with other people, and both the joys and some of the burdens of doing that, because it's different, because a lot of kids today sleep oftentimes by themselves, have their own rooms, and so sharing rooms and bathrooms with other people is an issue, and that's a challenge, and that's great to grow up with. I think it's part of growing up with. I think one of the things I really enjoyed, I enjoyed too, were meeting people from other places, both in Metro Atlanta. Back when I was a camper, you had the other side of town, and there was literally one other side of town. And today, there are kids in East Cobb and North Cobb and Alpharetta, Johns Creek, Decatur, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, and there are kids from all over Metro Atlanta. I think that's great. Also, I think meeting kids from other cities, forging relationships with kids in other towns, that was very influential in my experience. I've kept up with many of my friends from camp who now live in Boston, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, Houston, Texas, Florida, and I keep up with these folks.
Everybody kind of has a first at camp. Is there something that you were just like, my first ... was at camp?
I think the first time I ever spoke publicly in front of a large group other than my bar mitzvah was at camp, when I was in the CIT play. I hope it was CIT or JIT play. I can't remember which one it was. But we did Bye Bye Birdie, and I was Conrad Birdie, and that was a lot of fun.
What was the most important thing that you ever took away from being at camp?
I would say probably one of the more influential experiences was serving as a CIT, now called SIT. And it was an 8-week intensive training program that exposed us to all phases of camp. And I think that enabled me to have an appreciation for camp, both from the staff perspective, the specialist, the counselor perspective, and as a camper looking through it that lens and understanding how complex camp can be on one level, but yet it's about kids having fun, positive experiences in a Jewish environment. I can relate to people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, because there's something very common that we all think that the years that which we went to camp were the best years of camp ever. And I always like hearing that from other people, and I love to disagree, because I always think that the best years of Camp Barney Meadows were the years I went, but in reality I know the best years of Camp Barney Meadows are the years that those campers and those staff people go to camp and can share that experience.
Or when you were there?
Well, I was there when Benny Caudell worked there, and I had the privilege of working on staff in Benny's later years. And the stories about how Benny functionally built the chapel almost single-handedly, and used a Coke bottle and a string as a plumb blob, and how he used to often bend coins with his bare hands, and how he would birth the horses and sometimes carry them on his back. He was a man of immense strength, but he was also a gentle giant, and he also loved interacting with the kids. I went to camp for over 10 years, probably about 7 years as a camper and 3 years on staff. Right, that's right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Trevor.
Good.
I don't, I didn't
That's a
remember.
Right.
Okay.
And tell us why you hated camp.
Well, my years at camp, I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and so that was 1968, 69, 70. I really didn't enjoy my time at camp because I really didn't like going in the lake a whole lot. I was fortunate enough to have a swimming pool at my home, and I was really bothered by the lake. In fact, I would hide in the woods when it was time to swim. Swim time came around, or I would try to fake an illness and go to the infirmary and hang out there during swim time. But I didn't hate everything about camp. I really, some of my favorite memories, something that's really embedded in my memory, is waking up every morning to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. It was about the time that the album Four-Way Street came out, and there was a PA system that they had throughout the camp at that time. I don't think it's there now, but I understand they would play Teach Your Children Well. We would wake up to it at 7 o'clock every morning and experience something. And it always, when I hear those songs by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, it brings me back to Camp Barney Meadows.
Camp.
I think it may have been a Shabbat, actually, and we were required to wear white. And I just associate the white T-shirts and Shabbat and how nice it was over there at the chapel on the lake. I do remember, it was tough. I was homesick, even though my friends were there. I just really didn't like camp.
Symbolic at camp.
There was the stories of Benny, the super human strong guy that did just courageous things. I don't remember any specific thing that Benny did, but he was legendary even in those years. Even though I really didn't like camp, I'm still proud that I had the Camp Barney experience.
Couldn't go without a camp.
I believe it or not, I like the bug juice, even though the meat was rumored to be horse meat. The bug juice was pretty good stuff.
Okay, how many years did you go to camp?
I was up at Barney for 3 years.
Okay.
Memory was that my friends and I, there were about 3 of us, we would dress up in black and we would sneak out in the middle of the night. We thought we were like, James Bond or something, and we would go run around the camp when we weren't supposed to after curfew, and we would try to spy on the girls.
So some things never change, right?
That's right.
Perfect.
Very good.
So how many years did I go to camp? Okay, I'm Gail Hyman. I was Gail Goldstein. So Gail Goldstein Hyman. I went to camp starting in 1963. So I was 10, and I went through the time I was 18. So 8 years.
Perfect.
I was in Village 1 when I first went to camp. I had 2 older brothers at camp, but I was still very homesick. I remember being homesick. I loved camp. It was kind of a rite of passage. When you got to be a certain age, you left Camp Edgecumsey, which was part of the JCC, and you went to Camp Barney. So when you went to Camp Barney, it was a big deal.
Why do you think it's important that we are celebrating 50 years of Barney?
We are celebrating 50 years of Barney because that is just a long time. It's older campers. So it's great to have the new and the old come together, share memories, and probably Camp Barney is definitely progressive. When we went to camp, we only swam in the lake. There were very few activities, certainly no specialties, not the way they know it now. But the fact that Camp Now,
so strongly?
the reason people are so impacted by their experiences at Camp Barney is because it is definitely a camp that has social work values. The way you even do activities with your cabin, I mean, your cabin becomes your own community, and you learn how to deal with everyone in your cabin and likes and dislikes and choices of activities. That is a reflection of the real world. And then you're doing it at such a formative age, and you're doing it with the guidance of trained staff. I think it becomes an impression that adds value to the camper's life and to their adulthood.
It's kind of funny.
Camp was definitely better when I went to camp in the 1960s. First of all, we were extremely innocent. At that time, we were still watching Leave It to Beaver and June and Ward. I mean, that's who we knew. And then we go to camp, and it's just kind of a replication of just what you might imagine the 60s to look like in black and white. But we were in living color.
Perfect. That was a good answer.
Putting a lot in words. When we were campers, our parents really didn't want to know everything. They were very happy just to send us off to camp and let it be the counselor's problem. So if I was homesick, I doubt I even told my parents.
Camp is through the year.
The folklore that I remember at camp scared the daylights out of me. And it was the ghost on Jit Hill. And I don't know if that ghost is still there, but when I was at camp, I know there was a ghost at Jit Hill.
Perfect.
Color War for me, from the time I was a camper through the time I was a staff, was a surprise. I don't know why I never figured out when there was going to be a color war. I never knew which team I was going to be on. I couldn't even decide the better team, got to know the better colors. I just know I was into color war. And I remember after every color war, I lost my voice. It was the most exhilarating time of camp. And it was always a big surprise, like when is there going to be the next color war?
Last thing, just kind of talk about
the traditions that I remember the most at Camp Barney was wearing all whites on Friday nights. And there was a lot of red Georgia clay. So I would go to camp with this brand new pair of white shorts, white top, and white shoes. By the time I came home from camp, they were no longer white. But there was something special about putting on your whites, walking to chapel. There wasn't really the chapel that you know now, but we did have services, and you would see everyone in all white. There was something very holy about being in Camp Whites, very spiritual.
And last thing, being a co-chair, why is it important to you to be the co-chair for this event?
Being the co-chair of this event is an honor, particularly since I knew Barney Mednitz. So for me to be able to celebrate 50 years with his granddaughter, to bring together 50 years of campers and memories, I think just gives me the greatest amount of pleasure.
Perfect. Well, hold on. Going there.
The biggest gain that I had personally from going to camp was being part of a team. Likewise, the biggest gain that my son's during the year. He has peers that know his name. He has a language that he picks up at camp, and his social, emotional growth at camp supersedes anything that we can give him at home or that he can get from school or work. Individuals' growth, and to have a child with special needs be part of a regular camp environment and to learn from typical peers is it's priceless. It really is.
Great.
It's remarkable that Halutzim has been at Camp Barney for 20 years. To have is a challenge, but when our kids with special needs are at Camp Barney, socialization is no longer a challenge. It's actually just a grand opportunity. And so
For 8 years.
my name is Gail Goldstein Hyman, and I went to camp for 8 years.
Perfect. Yeah, so look into the camera and start off from the
Start the story over.
Scott has been in Halutzim, and he was in camp from the time he was 13. And when he's getting older, like 18, 19, 20, it's now time for him to have more responsibilities like a typical staff person. And I remember saying to Jim, you know, our boys in Halutzim and the girls, they're aging out, and it's inappropriate for them to be campers. What can we do so that they can have jobs at camp? He says, well, it'll involve job coaching. I said, okay, what if we come up with job coaches? He says, well, it'll involve a cabin because, you know, typically our staff has free time at night, and these staffers will need supervision. I said, fine. I said, what if we build a cabin? He says, I will deed you the land if you can raise the money for the cabin. So Harry Stern calls me, returning my call, and he says, Gail, I understand you think that there should be a cabin for staffers with special needs. Why do you think we should do this at Camp Barney? And I said, you know, Harry, the reason you should do this is that the campers at that camp are going to be our future doctors and lawyers and judges, and they should see adults with special needs having value in society, and they can contribute to camp. They can do the jobs as well as anyone else if they're trained. They can be trained for milk line, dining hall, the office, laundry, the infirmary. I mean, there's so many opportunities for them to contribute. And what would be better than for your campers to watch these adults thrive and contribute in society? Harry liked the idea. Jim was amazing. He sketched out a cabin. He's really good at that. Gave them a beautiful piece of property. We had it furnished, and to this day, Cabin 20 is an exceptional cabin at Camp Barney.
Perfect.
And to me, camp is home and family and a special place that could never be replaced or reinvented or recreated anywhere else but those 500 acres off of Highway 129. It is truly all that, but I think deep down camp doesn't change. It always is going to represent the place where each individual kid can go and grow and have the summer of their life, whether it be one summer or 24 summers. It's always going to be Camp Barney Meddons, our summer place, and a place you can go and grow and learn and have a great time. My experience that was much different. I think that camp is an amazing place for the individual that comes for the first time for 1 month out of the summer, because it's such a place where you can meet new friends, you can bond closer with old friends, and most importantly, not only will you learn different activities and new things and enjoy them, but you can be your own individual and grow as a person and change and learn and really become the person that you are going to be, starting with that 1 month at camp.
Reed?
Growing as a person, as a 10-year-old kid, you may think you're just going and having fun playing something on the junior ball field or riding a horse, but you're learning life lessons in how you work with others, how you bond, how your mind works, and physical growth as well. And it's offered every activity, and as a kid you don't think you want to be learning and growing, but when you're doing it in a fun atmosphere like camp is, it happens naturally.
Okay, say at camp I had my first...
At camp I had my first kiss under cabin 12 with Lindsay Faber. For me, the best time of day at camp was any time I was at the barn, riding a horse.
Hands for this, but say I went to camp, and then say how many years.
Okay. I went to camp 24 years.
Perfect.
I want to know who this Lindsay Favor is. My name is Terry Feldman Bagan. I was a charter camper at Camp Barney Meadows in 1963. My father was one of the people that worked with Barney Meadows and dreamed about a summer camp in the mountains and helped bring it to a reality, so it was only natural that I would be signed up to go that first summer.
How did Barney change over the years?
Camp
No, I know, but
Okay. Camp Barney Meadows has changed over the years. It has evolved and grown, not only in size, but programmatically, and to adapt to the changing needs of its campers and its staff. The camper, and I guess we were a little less sophisticated than kids today, because unit themes were very imaginative and very full-blown. And Irving Fonger was a wealthy rich boy from Australia who wanted to do good and had come to Barney Meadows to help us do good and become more like he was. And we sang about him, we did activities to prove ourselves to him, and at the end of camp he actually came and we met Irving Fonger. And I can still sing the songs, remember the programs, and I guess it was about 10 years ago. Probably not relevant to anybody else. I was going to say at camp I went into labor with my first child.
That's great.
that's perfect.
That's a great one.
Camp is ...
The best time at camp is Milkline. Everyone comes together and it's been a great day, and there's high energy, great memories of the day, great expectations for tomorrow. I gotta start that
Well,
one
no,
over.
that's fine. That's good.
It's been there since the beginning and should be there always.
In my mind, the philosophy of Camp Barney Meadows is that first and foremost, the camper is the most important part of camp. And the camper exists within the group. So it's a beautiful combination of working together in a group, growing together in a group, but being an individual within that group. I also think that part of the philosophy is that both the campers and the staff learn to love, appreciate, and live within nature, live their Judaism, and learn new skills.
My other question would be,
My son's experience and mine were very similar. We found a place that we knew we felt more comfortable than anywhere in the world, and we thrived in that environment. And we gained self-confidence, and we gained knowledge, and we did it where we loved to be with other people, where we made lasting friendships, and where being in nature, I really think the nature part of it, the outdoor part of it, for Ethan, the horse part of it, not so much for me, but learning to appreciate the simplicity of life in its most natural form was very important, and I think that that has affected the way we live our lives to this very day.
Talking about how you live your life to this day, what can you
Okay, what am I supposed to say?
just say? I went to camp and say how many years.
I went to camp 24 years.
Perfect.
Reagan. I went to camp for the first time in 1967. I was working at the community center, and all the rest of the staff in the children's department, most of us were going to camp. And I said, this is something I wanted to do. I had never been to camp before in my life, and I was a Village 3 counselor that summer. And Ed Robbins, the director, was heard to say, that's a cabin group with 9 campers in it. One of them just happens to be a little older and a little taller than the rest of them. A great place for me, and a great place for a lot of other kids in that time frame, and I'm sure it's still true today. It became family, it became home. It was a place that we were all together during the Vietnam times and everything like that. And the rest of the world's turmoil, it was a place we could be together. And once more, some of my campers from those years and Terry's campers from those years. One of the main ones is, of course, Barney Meditz himself. The man was legendary human being, and to the group of people, the post-war group of people, most of which almost all of them have passed away by now, including my father-in-law, Sidney Feldman, and Barney Meditz, he was the person that shaped all those people. And if you go to the Federation and you see the Lifetime Achievement Awards, the first 5 or 6 of these men all said, Barney Meditz shaped my life. And as a matter of fact, one time, piece of folklore himself. And the other one, of course, is Benny Caudell, the caretaker of the camp, who physically built most of the cabins in camp, built the chapel using a Coke bottle and a string as a plumb bob, and I believe it was designed by Hirsch, and he wanted them to call in a special builder, and they didn't. They said Benny could do this. Frank Fearman, the director of the community center, another legendary person, said Benny can do this, and Benny did build that building, and the structure was right. He could bend a quarter. You've heard the stories. He could get on a bucking crazed horse and talk it down. I saw him pick up a horse. Experienced that first year. I learned how to build a campfire, how to build a one-match fire. And that was I was as happy as sail at camp. I met my wife at camp, who's the love of my life and probably one of the greatest people I know. And as far as our children, camp was it was college. It was a whole lot better than college. One of the things I remember was the first time they told me I was in charge of services with my campers. And I did not know a lot about putting on services. And what I found was there's always 1 or 2 kids. And with the skills that I had been taught during Institute, and watching these kids, they know what to do. You just kind of move them along, and they knew what to do. And a child that has a chance to do services at camp, he's like the head rabbi in Minsk and Pinsk. All of a sudden, they're in charge, and they're the rabbi, and they know what to do. And it's just a marvelous, marvelous thing to see happen. And I never got tired trying to figure it out. I had the pleasure of working with with every single director in one way or another. So years on the camp committee.
How many years you went to camp?
Ronnie Goldman, and I went to camp for 15 years. I think the strongest camp memory would have to be sneaking out. It was core to most of what we did, so I think that's what I remember. One of the things I remember the most is how much fun we had doing that.
Any specific?
And getting caught was probably as much fun as the act itself. And so I remember many a times on porches having to do many things as punishment for getting caught sneaking out.
A first time at camp.
I think my first kiss happened at camp. That's probably true for many.
Some legend of camp.
Well, it's probably going to be similar to a lot, but it's hard not to remember the legends of Benny and everything he did to build camp. I think he built 90% of the cabins with one arm tied behind his back, but really the bending of the quarter with 2 fingers is probably the greatest legend in Barney lore. What does it mean to be a Camp Barney person? You're kind of part of a fraternity. for lack of a better way, or sorority, however you want to frame it. But it's part of a special group. You know, everybody thinks when they're there that that was the best time and the best place, and we all have great memories. And I think it's through that we all kind of have a shared bond and relationship with something that was special in all of our lives. Oh, goodness. Well, look, I grew up at camp. I mean, and for myself, coming from Macon, Georgia, a small town of which I was really the only Jewish person in my high school, enabled me to create incredible relationships and a Jewish identity that I never would have gotten otherwise. So I think it was important growth through, in terms of my religion and Judaism. And I think my kids, while they get more of that today, growing up here in Atlanta, I think.
I'm Stephen Cadronell, and I spent a couple of summers at Camp Barney Meditz in 72 and 74. A lot of fun on Jit Hill, back when there was a Jit Hill, and we were spending the summer in tents. Some of the coldest showers I can remember in my life. Great folks from all of us. Now, you get your list of everything you got to pack for camp, and no knives, no this, no that. Back then, the list included a variety of knives. We had to be able. It was common to try and sneak out and hide from your counselor as long as you could, and sometimes we did a pretty good job. Sometimes we didn't do such a good job. More cold showers when we got caught. More push-ups in the mud when we got caught, but always a lot of fun.
Say my first blink. What was that camp?
Gosh, it may have been my first kiss was at camp.
You remember who?
I do, but I don't think she would want me to share. And the adventure. The canoe overnights, the horseback overnights, the things that we did that you could only do at camp, and the memories that I still carry around right now of a lot of those adventures and a lot of those days. Camp Barney Meditz and the Marcus Jewish Community Center are one. It is I think fair to say that without the support of the Jewish Community Center and the Jewish community, Camp Barney Meditz wouldn't be as successful as it is, and likewise without the success of Camp Barney Meditz, the Marcus Jewish Community Center would not be able to serve all the people we serve. So the two go hand in hand and support each other and allow us to do a lot of great things, not just up in Cleveland, Georgia and at Camp Barney Meditz, but throughout the entire Atlanta community. It is a pillar of the Marcus Jewish Community Center. It is one of the most successful and largest camps in the country, and it's something we take a lot of pride in and need to find a way to continue to grow and nurture and make sure that the next 50 years are as impactful to future generations as the past 50 years have been to all of our generation.
Names and how many years you went to camp?
My name is Barbara Stein Finocchio, and I went to camp for 14 years, but I went in 3 different decades.
And I'm her husband, Michael Finocchio Stein, and I went to camp off and on for a few years and then became the membership director at the center downtown for a few years.
Mine is meeting some of my best friends that I'm still best friends with, and the caretaker at the time, Benny Caudell, who was an amazing man. We had all come from Pittsburgh and never met anybody like him, and so that is my strongest memories.
Mine is dating and marrying my wife of 43 years. It's a friendship that I can't explain to anybody else. It's just changed my whole life.
Done all my firsts.
I think it was my first horseback ride.
And he was head of horseback, so that was...
Head of horseback. And my first ride there, I was thrown 3 times in front of Benny's house, who was the caretaker, and still went on to be the horseback director.
Elaborate a little bit on the folklore, if you would.
Benny was a mountain man who could do anything. And when I first met him, he was kind of shy, and he certainly didn't know what kind of folklore he employed. He could carry things, he could pick up a horse, he could ride upside down on a horse, $1. He used to bend pennies for the kids as he drove through camp.
His hands were so big, he would put a penny between the joint of his finger and bend it like that.
When he drove through camp, he was like the Pied.
Stories from people.
You know, he was not sophisticated, and in building this beautiful chapel, instead of using a plumb bob like we expect today with a string and a metal float, he used a Coke bottle and a piece of string. And if you've ever seen the chapel, it's perfect. It's just beautiful.
Somebody told that exact story?
Yeah.
Probably Laurie Camp. But that first year, we had 27 people from Pittsburgh. They were all in leadership positions and accepted it. Probably like this year, it rained every single day. So we had a lot of creative programming. So I guess the first year was one that I'll always remember.
And the philosophy of camp.
I said the friends I made, and we used to have a saying that your friends from camp are your friends from life, for life, and it really rang true. And you know, Camp Barney Meadows is a special place. It's a place to think about all winter long, and it's a place where...
Say your name and how many years you went to camp.
My name's Michael Dennerman, and I attended camp for 7 years as a camper and 1 year as a staff member.
It's your camp. You guys start.
Jit Hill, whatever.
Okay. My most fond memories of camp folklore would be, of course, of Benny Claudel, who is the Paul Bunyan of camp, and there are many legends. I think the most important thing I learned at camp was just simply my sense of Jewish identity and community. It's something that I look forward to every year.
Little memory from camp.
One of my strongest camp memories was arriving at the top of Blood Mountain, and when we got to the top, there was a military exercise, and there were some fighter jets that literally flew maybe 100 feet above our head, and I still can feel the hair standing up on the back of my neck from having these fighter jets pass right over us on the top of Blood Mountain.
I never, that's a good question. Eric Robbins, 18 years Camp Barney Meadows.
Wow.
And I had an incredible time the first session of camp, and I refused to leave, literally refused to leave. And Steve Krams was the director at the time, and I went up to him, I said, I am not leaving, and he let me stay. So that was my most vivid memory of camp. I think made all the difference in my life, that one moment. Now, Larry Melnick would have never done that. That was the good thing about Steve Krams. He actually let me stay. So I stayed 2 sessions my first year at Barney Meadows. All the time, too, is I lost all my clothes in the laundry, and they took me to, at that point, I think it was called Richway, because it was pre-Walmart days. So I have like a tremendous collection of Atlanta Flames and Atlanta Braves and all kinds of Atlanta clothing that I took back to Pittsburgh with me. I'd say my first real experience at Independence, just really being on my own, being able to make decisions, not necessarily being under the umbrella of my family, and just really feeling like I could, that I was in command of what I did and how I fit into the group and the cabin. So I'd say it was really Independence, first experience at Independence. I truly think Camp Barney shaped, who I am as an individual in so many ways. And a lot of that was who I am, where I was in life, and not necessarily, and just being at camp, the magic. but the people I met and the values that it taught me, the Jewish connection, the Jewish friends I built, the community that I became a part of, my eventual going into the field and becoming a camp director myself is all from my Barney Medicine experiences.
I think that I was at camp for about 25, 26, 27 years. I was there at Camp Rutledge the last year that it.
And I'm Vicki Stein, and I started at camp when I was 10. And I went to camp until we got married. Our first married year, I was 24. I did have 2 years that I was not there, but I was there for 12 years.
Did you guys meet at camp?
We did. So when I was probably my favorite thing was sitting in the chapel. And it still is. I love sitting there and looking out over the lake and looking out at the mountains beyond that. And there's just a sense of peacefulness at being at camp. There's not one particular thing or one particular moment. It's an accumulation of a lifetime of moments and friendships.
Probably my first year at camp that Benny knew every single camper, or at least he pretended like he did and acted like every one of them was his favorite camper. And so the relationship that I developed with Benny, favorite Benny stories was that Benny, when he would find a wristwatch at camp, he would put it on his wrist. And when he would drive around in his truck, he'd take his arm and he'd lay it up on the door of his truck. And there were times when Benny would have 4 or 5 watches on his wrist, and he would do that every time he drove past anybody in hopes that one of them would say, "Hey, Benny, where'd you find my watch?" There were lots of firsts for me at camp. I mean, the first time I rode a horse, the first time that I skied, the first time that I shot a rifle, the first time that I shot a bow and arrow. I mean, just, it goes on and on at camp.
The first time I went to the back staff house.
Whoa.
It was because of him.
Yeah, let's not tell that story. When Larry Melnick was director, the years that Larry was director were the absolute best. The years that Bubba, and that is that when Bubba was there, it was our first years on staff, and that Bubba showed us as 17 and 18-year-olds the respect of an adult. He treated us like real people. He didn't treat us like kids. And then, of course, working with Larry,
Any letters home that ever ring a bell? Anything that you heard back from camp from the kids that
What
rings
letters
a bell?
home? When you have to write home, what do you write? It's either having a great time, love my counselor, or camp sucks. So fortunately, most of them have been having a great time, love my counselor.
It's kind of like a fill in the blank every year.
Yeah, right.
Well, in fact, several of the years at camp, we would do that. We would hand out the Tony the Tiger postcards, so the kids didn't have to write anything, but they could communicate more. And it would say, I love my counselor. My favorite activity is, my best friend in the cabin group is, and so you get it. I mean, the camp connection is just, it's universal, it's worldwide, and it lasts forever.
As the light of each summer's day reaches its end, I'll sit by the fire with all my good friends. A million tomorrows will never erase the fun and the joy and the beauty of our summer place. That's enough, right?
That's really good. Years you went to camp?
Stephen Grosswald, 14 years, or 14 good seasons, as they used to say at Barney Bennett's.
What woke you up out of your bed?
It's a great story. No power, of course, in the JIT tents, and they had just come out with Speed Stick Minin by Minin, and I caked it on, and long day out in the woods, and it caked up underneath my armpit, and I thought there was a tick. Being a paranoid, nice young Jewish boy from Atlanta, I thought there was a tick under my arm. So I lay down. I said, "Hey, there's a tick. Can we find a flashlight?"
guys were cracking up. They kicked in my bed, fell through. We had a good time. We were cracking up. Of course, later we went and got a flashlight and found out it was just a big cake of speed stick menin, not a tick, under my arm. Great story. Fond memory from Barney Medicine. Should have been there.
Speaking of,
That's, as I have said, that's the greatest gift that my parents gave me, was to send me to camp, because there's so many things. The first time I, slept in the woods, went water skiing, rock climbing, his girlfriend. First time I had barbecued bologna.
Who was the girlfriend?
Getting letters home?
Great letters home, how she's having the time of her life, and that just having a blast, and wishes that her little siblings who are too young to go could be there. And she really feels at home at Camp Barney Medicine person. And that's tough to sum up. I know that there's something about when you go to camp that you make friends and people that you meet, and no matter what you do in your life, somehow you always remember those camp moments and those camp friends. And as I have alluded to, and people that 10 years of blissful joy. Even your worst day at Camp Barney Medicine was better than your best day anywhere else.
How do you think
It was great confidence builder, able to use a lot of creative. It was a great creative outlet, making cheers and skits and doing things for me. I really enjoyed that part of it, as well as I think it helped me. This sounds ridiculous. Camp Barney Medicine helped me because as a camper and as a staff member, you move around from cabin to cabin. And when I went to college and you moved around, it was no big deal. I was, put everything in 2 milk crates and you're ready to go. And when my wife met me, all I had was 2 laundry baskets, one for the dirty clothes, the other was upside down as a nightstand. And I learned that from Camp Barney Medicine.
Classic. Very good, Stephen. Let's
start over. Okay, ask us.
Okay.
We already forgot our question.
Okay, no, I know. Okay, so I'm Michelle Wynn Levy, and this is my sister.
I'm Stacy Wynn Schiff, and I went to camp maybe, I think 9 or 10 years I was at Barney.
And I was probably 8 or 9 years. The minute she stopped, I jumped ship.
First, ...
Okay, I could go first. At camp, I had my first incident getting bucked off of a horse named Blackie because Susan, who was on horseback staff, made me go on that horse. Scared to death to ride horses to this day. Don't even walk near them. I just look at them and at their beauty. So that's my memory of camp and horseback.
At camp, I had my first boyfriend.
Who was that?
I don't even remember.
She didn't have it.
I'll go first this time. My favorite memory of camp was the last night when they would do right by the chapel and on the lake, they would do the huge bonfire, and they would sit and sing all of our favorite...
I'm leaving on a jet
yeah,
plane.
all of our favorite songs. That's probably my fondest memories.
I think my fondest memory would be when I was a JIT. I had a really great year because Steve Mendel was actually my counselor. And that was probably my first year of ever being like really committed to being a really good camper and really trying to do things that I really didn't enjoy doing, like horseback or campouts, because I really liked Steve and had so much respect for him that I wanted to be a good camper for him.
So y'all obviously
her 7th year, and it's just neat for them to come home and sing all the songs that I remember singing as a young child. And
best memories of camp. She tells me all the time if she didn't have camp in her life, part of her life would just be missing. It's that important to her. Do this? Did y'all do that? And it's just such a big part of her life. I mean, I can always, when the school year gets rough around March, I can always say 3 months till camp, and then it gets her through a lot.
Yeah.
There's never quiet. It's just, so much spirit and fun, and I think that it's a place that gets away from school and computers and cell phones, and it's just a place you can be crazy and yourself and funny and sing songs at the top of your lungs and just have the time of your life. You can stay up all night, you can do things that you'll never get to experience anytime else in your life, and I think that's what makes it so special. Maybe 6 or 7 years that the best time is after lunch when they start playing the music, playing the guitars, and all the kids get on the benches and the tables and they
sing
just
and dance.
sing and they hug, and it doesn't matter if you're boys, girls, they're all hugging, singing together. It doesn't matter who you are, the age, everyone has a place and a home there. And I swear every time
Okay, let's do it again and actually say how many years.
Okay.
No hands?
No, hands
Okay.
too.
I went to camp for 10 years.
I went to camp for 9 years.
73, I had this little Tourette syndrome thing that was going on, but at Camp Barney, people accepted me for who I was, and you know what, I could smell trees and do different things like that. My counselor sometimes looked at me a little differently, but you know what, it was a home, it was a safe haven for me, and 30-something years later, 40 years later, I still love it.
What is your fond memory of camp?
One of my fondest memories, it was a scary memory, but it was a great memory, is I don't know what year it was, but we were up in the chapel. It was a Friday night, and it was a beautiful night, and we were doing services. And all of a sudden, a storm blew in. It was a tornado or something blew in so quick that they looked at me, we looked at each other, they're like, sing, do something, sing, let's make them enjoy themselves. So I got up and we started doing Once There Was a Wizard and singing so loud that the kids were scared, but they didn't know what was going on. And by the time the song was done and all the damage was done, everyone up in camp was safe, and it was just one of those memories.
1997, I was a JIT. In
Okay.
fact, you said that you were there from 1993 to 2003. And one of the reasons was, or the main reason was because of the Holocene program. You obviously have a very dear place for that in your heart. Tell us about the Holocene program and why it is so important and why it's so special at camp.
The Holocene program at Camp Barney gives children and young adults with developmental disabilities or any kind of special need a chance to be a camper, a chance to go somewhere and be just like any other kid. And they're given high fives all day and they're doing all the activities. Sometimes we have to adapt things, if they move a little slower, do something a little differently. We are able to adapt things at Camp Barney. The staff is able to adapt things. It's become such a wonderful program that kids from around the states come to do this, because in the 50 states we have, I don't think there's many programs where in a typical camp environment, they have a special need environment. And we've had this for over instances, but it's also given the other kids and counselors at Barney a chance to be with kids that are special needs and a chance to give them a better look at people with special needs. And you know what? Everyone was just one big family. The best part of Camp Barney Minutes is from when you wake up at usually about 7:15 in the morning until you lay your head down on the pillow, usually about 12:30 or 1. You know what? I've had so many... At Camp Barney Minutes, I had my first experience of Shabbat in the chapel in 1973, and it sticks in my mind 42 years later, and I still see the same images, and I still sit in the same spot when I go up to the chapel. My first experience at the chapel at Camp Barney is probably the most beautiful experience I've ever had, and I was 7 years old.
Successful for 50 years.
Camp Barney Minutes has been so successful for 50 years because of the wonderful Jewish community in Georgia, in Atlanta, the supportive, the entrepreneurs, the philanthropic, all the people that give, and they give to what they should, a place where kids can have fun. At Camp Barney Minutes, I learned a life lesson not to judge other people, because you know what? I've been going there my whole life, and I have Tourette syndrome, and I have a lot of different kind of behaviors that come out of this good-looking body. But Camp Barney, no one ever judged me. Everyone always let me be the person I was. So I probably say in my 47 years alive, I've grown most of my life from a lot of things, but Camp Barney was a huge, huge part of my life of making me independent and making me have respect for people and nature and just everything in general. Okay. Once there was a wizard who lived in Africa, who went to China to learn to read the Torah. The Torah Bimli, Torah Bimli, Bimli, Bimli. Oh, once there was a wizard. Cut. Is that you on his lap? I remember him taking a nickel or whatever it was, putting it between his two fingers and squeezing it. And I think Lori Bagan, what I remember the stories are, is that he could pick up a cow or some kind of cattle that he could pick up from the day it was born to the day it died. And it was like over 1,000 pounds. He was amazing in how strong he was. Benny, and he was the camp pranks that I remember were the best are when the Jits it was a Jit group. I think they took all the Playaks or all the canoes and they hung them from the cafeteria or something like that. The Jits would always have a great prank, and remind me of some of the pranks when I was there, where a total cabin would be taken outside. Like when I was unit head for Halutzim in about 2000, I was off for the weekend, and I came back, and every shoe and piece of clothing I had was hanging from my rafters. And I came back, they got a picture of me, and they had a great time. See, Camp Barney's the kind of